My name is Leona, and I am 62 years old. As a wealthy widow with just one son, Nathan, I thought I had everything planned out. At his extravagant wedding to Amanda, I accidentally overheard something that changed everything. "We'll put his mom in a nursing home and take that beach house," my new daughter-in-law whispered to her friend. I stood frozen invisible behind the bathroom door as my world shifted. What she didn't realize was that she had just declared war on a woman who had weathered many storms in life and come out stronger each time. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about not underestimating women of a certain age. Trust me, what I did next might just inspire you to stand your ground when others try to take what's yours. I wasn't always the wealthy widow that Amanda saw as an obstacle to her plans. I grew up in a middle-class family in Brookline, Massachusetts, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. My parents taught me the value of hard work, education, and integrity, lessons that would shape my entire life. I met William during my sophomore year at Boston University. I was studying business administration, working part-time at the campus bookstore to help pay my tuition. He was a senior majoring in finance with dreams bigger than the cramped apartment he shared with 3 roommates. William walked into the bookstore one rainy October afternoon looking for a specific economics textbook. I helped him find it, and somehow we ended up talking for 3 hours after my shift ended. "You're different from other girls I've met," he told me that first day. "You've got this fire in your eyes when you talk about your future." William and I became inseparable. We shared not just a romance, but a vision. While our classmates were planning weekend parties, we were sketching business ideas on napkins at the small coffee shop where we spent countless hours. We both came from families where money was always tight, and we were determined to build something better. After William graduated, he took a job at a small real estate firm. I joined him there when I finished my degree 2 years later. We got married in a simple ceremony at my parents' backyard, saving every penny we could for our future. "We're going to build an empire together," William would say, his eyes bright with determination. "Brick by brick, property by property." And that's exactly what we did. Our first investment was a tiny rundown duplex in a transitioning neighborhood. We scraped together the down payment from our combined savings and wedding gifts. During the day, we worked at the real estate firm. Evenings and weekends were spent renovating that duplex ourselves, painting, repairing, learning plumbing, and basic electrical work from library books, and the kind elderly man who owned the hardware store. We lived in one half of the duplex and rented out the other, using the rental income to help pay the mortgage. Every extra dollar went into our savings for the next property. It wasn't glamorous. Many nights I fell asleep with paint in my hair or plaster dust on my clothes, but we were building something together. Our second property came a year later, then a third the following year. William had a talent for spotting undervalued properties with potential, and I had a knack for numbers and negotiations. We complemented each other perfectly in business as in life. By our 5th anniversary, we had 6 properties and had quit our jobs to focus on our growing business. We incorporated as Wilson Properties, working out of a tiny office above a deli. Those early years were exhilarating, despite the challenges. We weathered the recession of the early 1990s, making careful choices while others panicked and sold. When the market recovered, we were positioned to expand rapidly. Nathan came into our lives when we were both 30 a decade into building our business. I'd worried about balancing motherhood with our demanding work schedule, but William was adamant. "Life is about more than just making money, Lee," he said, using his pet name for me. "We're building this for our family, for the next generation." Nathan became the center of our world, even as the business continued to grow. I cut back my hours when he was young, working from home when possible. William took him to property viewings in a baby carrier, teaching him about crown molding and load-bearing walls before he could even talk. As Nathan grew older, our business expanded beyond residential rentals into commercial properties and development projects. By Nathan's 10th birthday, Wilson Properties had become one of the most respected boutique real estate companies in the Boston area. We had moved from our first duplex to a beautiful historic home in Beacon Hill, a symbol of how far we'd come. Our proudest purchase came when Nathan was 12, a stunning beachfront property in Cape Cod. It had been a dream of ours since those early dates when we'd drive to the coast and walk along the shore, pointing out which houses we liked best. One day, William would promise squeezing my hand as we watched the waves. The Cape Cod house became our sanctuary, a place where we could escape the pressures of work and city life. Nathan learned to swim in those waters, built sandcastles on that beach, had his first summer crush on the girl whose family rented the house 3 doors down. So many precious memories were created there. When Nathan left for college at Dartmouth, William and I began spending more time at the beach house. We'd talk about eventually retiring there, watching sunsets from the deck, entertaining grandchildren someday. But fate had other plans. 8 years ago, when Nathan was 24 and freshly graduated, William's small private plane crashed during a business trip to upstate New York. Just like that, my partner in life and business was gone. The pain was indescribable. For 30 years, every decision, every victory, every challenge had been shared with William. Suddenly, I was alone at the helm of a multi-million-dollar company, navigating grief while trying to maintain the business we'd built together. Many people, including some of our business associates, expected me to sell the company. They assumed that without William, I wouldn't be able to manage everything. They didn't realize that while William had been the more visible partner, I had been equally involved in every aspect of Wilson Properties from day one. "Mom, you don't have to keep the business going," Nathan said gently, a few weeks after the funeral. "No one would blame you for selling." "This company is your father's legacy," I told him. "And mine too. I'm not ready to give that up." So I threw myself into work, channeling my grief into growing what William and I had started. I expanded our commercial division, ventured into luxury condominium development, and even established a property management branch. The business not only survived without William, but thrived. Nathan joined the company after working for a larger real estate firm for a couple of years post-college. He had William's eye for property potential, but lacked his father's decisive nature and risk tolerance. Still, he was learning, and I hoped that eventually he would take over the company entirely. By the time I met Amanda, I had settled into my new normal. I had our main home in Beacon Hill, the beach house in Cape Cod that I treasured above all other properties, and a portfolio of residential and commercial real estate that generated substantial income. I had good friends, charity work I was passionate about, and a close relationship with my son. My life wasn't what I had planned with William, but it was still rich and fulfilling. I thought I had weathered the worst storm of my life when I lost William. I had no idea that another one was brewing on the horizon in the form of a beautiful, calculating young woman who set her sights on everything I had built. Nathan brought Amanda home to meet me about 2 years ago. I remember the day clearly. It was a crisp fall Sunday, and I had prepared a roast with all the trimmings, Nathan's favorite meal since childhood. "Mom, I really want you to meet her," Nathan had said over the phone earlier that week. "I think she might be the one." My son had dated several women since college, but none of the relationships had lasted more than a year or so. This was the first time he'd used those words, the one, and I was both excited and apprehensive. At 30, Nathan was certainly of an age to settle down, but as a mother, I couldn't help wondering if any woman would be good enough for my only child. When they arrived, my first impression of Amanda was undeniably positive. She was stunning, tall and slender with glossy dark hair, wearing an expensive-looking cream cashmere sweater and simple gold jewelry that spoke of understated wealth. She carried a bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers, and a bottle of very good wine. "Mrs. Wilson, I've heard so much about you," she said, embracing me warmly. "Nathan talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you." "Please call me Leona," I replied, charmed, despite myself, by her apparent enthusiasm to meet me. During that first lunch, Amanda was the picture of graciousness. She complimented my home, asked thoughtful questions about family photos, and seemed genuinely interested in stories about Nathan's childhood. She laughed at all the right moments, touched Nathan's arm affectionately throughout the meal, and offered to help with dishes afterward. "Your mother is just as wonderful as you described," I overheard her tell Nathan in the kitchen. "I can see where you get your kind heart." By the time they left that afternoon, I could understand why Nathan was so taken with her. Amanda was not just beautiful but articulate and charming, with a successful career in public relations for a luxury hospitality group. She seemed perfect, almost too perfect, like a character from central casting, rather than a real person with flaws and quirks. Over the next few months, I saw them regularly. Amanda continued to be warm and attentive in Nathan's presence. She would bring me small gifts, a scarf she thought would match my eyes, artisanal chocolates. From a boutique, she discovered a book by an author she heard me mention. She asked my advice about work challenges and invited me to ladies' lunches with her friends. But occasionally I caught glimpses of another Amanda when Nathan wasn't looking. A flash of impatience, a momentary hardening of her eyes, a tightening of her smile that didn't reach her eyes. Small things that most people might not notice, but as someone who had built a successful business, partly by reading people accurately, these subtle shifts caught my attention. The first clear incident occurred about 6 months after we met. Nathan had stepped outside to take an important work call, leaving Amanda and me alone in my living room. The transformation was immediate and jarring. "Is there anything stronger than this white wine?" she asked, her voice lacking the musical quality it had when Nathan was present. "I need something to get through another afternoon of looking at baby pictures." When I offered scotch instead, she accepted with visible relief. As she sipped, her posture changed. She kicked off her heels and sprawled on my antique sofa in a way she never would have if Nathan were watching. "God, it's exhausting being on all the time," she muttered, more to herself than to me. When she noticed my raised eyebrow, she quickly recovered. "Work has been so demanding lately. It's hard to always be the upbeat girlfriend when you're running on empty." I accepted the explanation, but filed away the moment in my mental catalog of observations about Amanda. As time went on, more inconsistencies emerged. Stories about her family changed subtly with each telling. First, her father was a retired professor, then an investment banker, then a consultant who traveled extensively. Her childhood was spent in Connecticut, then Virginia, then boarding schools in Switzerland. "I could have sworn you said your father taught at Yale," I mentioned once when she was describing his banking career. "Oh, that was after he retired from finance," she replied smoothly. "He got bored with golf and started teaching a few classes. I don't talk about it much because he wasn't very good at it." She laughed dismissively and quickly changed the subject. Amanda also showed an unusual interest in my properties, particularly the beach house in Cape Cod. The first time Nathan took her there for a weekend, she returned absolutely enchanted. "Leona, that house is magical," she gushed. "The view, the private beach access, those sunset decks. Nathan showed me the room he stayed in during summers growing up. We talked about how our kids might stay in that same room someday." She looked at me meaningfully, clearly, testing my reaction to the mention of grandchildren. After that visit, Amanda frequently suggested weekend trips to Cape Cod. She began referring to it as our beach house in conversation, a presumption that made me vaguely uncomfortable, though I couldn't articulate exactly why. "When we're at our beach house next weekend," she would say, or, "We should invite the Millers to our place in Cape Cod this summer." I also noticed that Nathan was changing since Amanda entered his life. My once devoted son became increasingly unavailable. Our Sunday dinners, a tradition since he moved into his own apartment after college, became less frequent. He rarely called just to chat anymore, and when he did, Amanda was often audibly present in the background. When I mentioned this shift to him, he became defensive. "Mom, I'm an adult with a busy life and a serious relationship. I can't be checking in with you every day like I'm still in high school." It was such an uncharacteristic response from my typically considerate son that I was momentarily speechless. Later, I wondered if those were his words at all, or if Amanda had suggested the response to him. My concerns grew enough that I eventually did something I never thought I would do. I hired a private investigator. It felt intrusive and distrustful, but the stakes were high. If Nathan was planning to marry this woman, I needed to know who she really was. The investigator's report arrived 3 months later, just as Nathan was telling me he was shopping for engagement rings. What I learned made my blood run cold. Amanda had a pattern of relationships with wealthy older men before Nathan, including one who had changed his will to include her, only to die unexpectedly months later. The inheritance had been contested by his family, and eventually, Amanda had settled for a significantly smaller amount than what was initially bequeathed. There were other red flags: a name change from Amanda Pearson to Amanda Porter when she was 22, a bankruptcy filing quickly after receiving her settlement, and a series of increasingly prestigious jobs obtained through references from former romantic partners. I considered showing the report to Nathan, but ultimately decided against it. He was so enamored with Amanda that I feared he would see it as an attack rather than a protective measure. Instead, I decided to keep the information to myself and watch more carefully, hoping that in time Nathan would see the inconsistencies I was noticing. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly Amanda would accelerate her plans once Nathan proposed. The engagement happened at Christmas, and by January she was in full wedding planning mode, pushing for a summer ceremony at one of the most exclusive venues in Martha's Vineyard. "Don't you think that's rushing things?" I asked Nathan privately. "You've only known each other for about a year and a half." "When you know," he replied with the confidence of the truly besotted. "Dad proposed to you after 8 months, right?" That was different. I started to explain, but Nathan cut me off. "It's exactly the same. You're just having a hard time seeing your little boy as grown up enough to make this decision." I backed off, recognizing that pushing would only drive a deeper wedge between us. Instead, I focused on supporting the wedding plans while trying to maintain some reasonable boundaries on spending and scale. It quickly became clear, however, that Amanda had no interest in my input unless it was financial. When I suggested the garden at my Beacon Hill home as a possible venue, where William and I had hosted numerous charity events, Amanda dismissed the idea immediately. "Nathan deserves a proper wedding, not a backyard barbecue," she said with a thin smile. "We're thinking the Ocean Cliff Resort on Martha's Vineyard. It's where Blake Lively had her wedding." When the initial cost estimates came in at over $300,000, I gently suggested scaling back. "That seems excessive for one day," I noted during a planning lunch with just the three of us. "This isn't just one day," Amanda countered, reaching for Nathan's hand. "It's the beginning of our life together, the foundation of our family story. Don't you want that to be perfect?" The emotional manipulation was masterful. Any objection I raised made me seem stingy, uncaring about Nathan's happiness, or stuck in the past. Nathan, ever the peacekeeper, would inevitably side with Amanda to avoid conflict. "Mom, I know it's a lot, but I want Amanda to have the wedding of her dreams. You only get married once, right?" I bit back the observation that statistically that wasn't true for many people, and reluctantly agreed to cover most of the wedding costs. In the grand scheme of things, even an exorbitant wedding was a small price to pay if it kept the lines of communication open with my son. As the wedding approached, Amanda became increasingly transparent in her dismissal of me when Nathan wasn't present. Planning meetings that should have included me happened without notice. Decisions were made and presented as fait accompli. My role was reduced to writing checks and showing up when and where directed. "We've decided on an intimate rehearsal dinner," Amanda informed me 2 weeks before the wedding. "Just immediate family and the wedding party at Nautilus. They're holding 20 spots." 20 spots for immediate family, I questioned. "Nathan and I don't have 20 family members combined, even counting cousins." "Well, my side is larger," she replied vaguely. "And of course, my parents need to invite a few key business associates who are traveling for the wedding." Later, I would discover that my brother and his family, Nathan's only living relatives on our side besides me, hadn't been included in the intimate dinner. When I raised this with Nathan, he seemed surprised. "I thought we agreed they would just come to the main wedding, since they're arriving late Friday," he said, looking confused. "That's not what I understood," I replied carefully. "Who made that decision?" I thought we all did," he stammered. "There must have been a miscommunication." There were dozens of such miscommunications in the months leading up to the wedding. Each one seemed minor in isolation, but together formed a pattern of systematically sidelining me from what should have been one of the most important events in my son's life, and mine as his only parent. By the time the wedding weekend arrived, I had a growing sense of unease about Amanda's true character and intentions, but I still had no idea just how calculated and cold-blooded she really was. That revelation would come during the wedding itself, in a moment that would change everything. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in early June at the Ocean Cliff Resort on Martha's Vineyard, just as Amanda had insisted. The venue was undeniably spectacular, a historic mansion perched on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, surrounded by manicured gardens and offering breathtaking ocean views. If I were being honest, it was far more impressive than my Beacon Hill garden would have been. I arrived on the island Thursday afternoon, a day after Nathan and Amanda. They were staying at the resort, but despite there being plenty of rooms available, I had been booked into a small inn about 15 minutes away. "The resort is really just for the wedding party and Amanda's immediate family," Nathan explained when I questioned the arrangement. "It's a space issue, apparently." I chose not to point out that I was, in fact, a member of the immediate family and had paid for the bulk of the reservation. It was becoming clear that this pattern of exclusion was deliberate, and fighting each individual battle would only make me appear difficult and jeopardize my already tenuous relationship with my son. The rehearsal dinner on Friday evening was at Nautilus, an upscale restaurant in town. As predicted, I hardly knew anyone there. Amanda's parents, Howard and Diane Porter, held court at the center of the table. Howard loud and boisterous, Diane perfectly coiffed and watchful. They greeted me with practiced cordiality, but spent little time in actual conversation with me. "Leona, the mother of the groom at last," Howard boomed when we were introduced. "I was beginning to think you were a figment of Nathan's imagination. Where have they been hiding you?" "Hardly hiding," I replied with a smile. "Just busy with last-minute preparations." "Well, we're thrilled Nathan is joining our family," Diane said, her eyes evaluating my simple but expensive black cocktail dress and pearl necklace. Amanda has always had exquisite taste. The seating arrangement placed me at the far end of the table, separated from Nathan by Amanda's college roommates and cousins. I spent most of the evening making polite conversation with Amanda's uncle, who seemed as out of place as I was. "Don't take it personally," he advised after his third scotch, nodding toward the center of the table, where Amanda was captivating everyone with some story. "Amanda has always been very strategic about who gets the spotlight. Been that way since she was a little girl." I raised an eyebrow, interested in this glimpse into Amanda's childhood from a family member. You've known her since she was young, then? He snorted. Known her, I practically raised her for a few years when Diane was busy with her health retreats. He made air quotes around the words. Back when they were living in that tiny apartment in Queens before Howard's car dealership hit it big. This was news to me. Amanda had described an idyllic childhood in Greenwich, Connecticut, with summer camps in Europe and horseback riding lessons. There had never been any mention of Queens or financial struggles. Before I could probe further, Amanda's mother appeared at our end of the table, smiling tightly. "Terry, I think you've had enough for one evening," she said, placing a hand on her brother's shoulder. "The car is waiting to take you back to the hotel." She steered him away, throwing me an apologetic glance. Poor Terry, always living in the past. More wine, Leona? The wedding day dawned sunny and perfect, as if specially ordered to match Amanda's vision. I spent the morning alone in my in-room getting ready and reflecting on Nathan's childhood, how quickly time had passed, and how William should have been here for this day. I arrived at the venue early, hoping to see Nathan before the ceremony. The coordinator directed me to a small sitting room in the East Wing, explaining that the main house was being used by the bride and her attendants. "The groom and groomsmen are in the carriage house on the other side of the property," she added. "I can have someone take you over if you'd like." When I tried to go see Nathan, I was intercepted by one of Amanda's bridesmaids. "Oh, they're right in the middle of photos," she said apologetically. "Amanda's very particular about the timeline. But I'll tell Nathan you were looking for him." I retreated to my assigned waiting area, increasingly aware that I had been effectively quarantined from the entire pre-wedding activities. When it was finally time for the ceremony, an usher appeared to escort me to my seat. To my surprise, I was not in the traditional position for the mother of the groom in the front row. Instead, I was seated in the second row behind Amanda's extended family. When I questioned the usher, he checked his chart and confirmed this was the correct placement. "I believe the coordinator worked directly with the bride on the seating arrangements," he explained uncomfortably. I took my assigned seat, swallowing my hurt and disappointment. This was Nathan's day, I reminded myself. It wasn't about me or my feelings. I would not create a scene that might embarrass my son or cast a shadow over his wedding. The ceremony itself was beautiful, if overly elaborate. Amanda appeared in a gown that must have cost as much as a small car, looking genuinely radiant. Nathan's face when he saw her walking down the aisle was filled with such love and happiness that I felt my resentment soften slightly. Whatever Amanda's faults, my son clearly adored her. The reception was held in a grand tent overlooking the water. Once again, I found myself seated far from the main wedding party, at a table with distant relatives of Amanda's and a few work colleagues of Nathan's, whom I barely knew. I made the best of it, engaging in pleasant conversation and dancing with a few kind older gentlemen who took pity on the mother of the groom sitting alone. It was during this reception, about 2 hours in, that everything changed. I had excused myself to find a restroom navigating through the maze-like historic mansion. The main floor restrooms had lines, so I ventured upstairs, remembering seeing facilities near the bridal suite during my brief tour earlier. As I approached, I heard voices coming from a small sitting room adjacent to the restrooms. Amanda's voice distinct and completely different from her usual carefully modulated tones, and another woman's voice I recognized as Brittany, her maid of honor. "God, I thought that ceremony would never end," Amanda was saying. "Did you see Leona's face when she realized she was in the second row? Priceless." They both laughed, and I froze in the hallway, out of sight, but able to hear every word. "How long do you think before you can start implementing the rest of the plan?" Brittany asked. "The beach house might take a while, right?" "Not as long as you'd think," Amanda replied confidently. "Nathan already talks about us spending summers there with our future children. He sees it as his childhood home. It's just a matter of gradually pushing the idea that his mother is getting older and might need more support." Is she, though? She looks pretty spry to me. Doesn't matter. Nathan is very protective of her since his dad died. If I suggest she's showing signs of not managing well, he'll believe me. Especially once I start moving her things around and hiding them, maybe mess with her calendar a bit. I felt my blood turn to ice at the calculated cruelty of what I was hearing. So what's the timeline? Brittany pressed. A year, maybe 2 at most. We'll suggest that the big house in Boston is too much for her to maintain, that she'd be happier in a nice assisted living community. Very upscale, of course. Amanda laughed softly. We'll put his mom in a nursing home and take that beach house. She won't need it anymore. I've been dreaming about that beach house since Nathan first took me there. What about the Boston house? Brittany asked. That place must be worth millions in that neighborhood. Of course, that too. Nathan's an only child. Everything will go to him, which means us. The company, the properties, everything. I've already started suggesting he take a more active role in the business. Leona's been running it alone since his father died, and she's bound to make mistakes. When she does, Nathan will be positioned to step in. You really think she'll just hand everything over? Brittany sounded skeptical. She won't have a choice, Amanda said with chilling confidence. Once we establish that she's declining, it's a matter of protecting the family assets. Nathan would never let her jeopardize what his father built. He's sentimental that way. They continued talking, but I had heard enough. I retreated silently, finding another restroom downstairs, my mind racing with what I had just discovered. This wasn't just a manipulative daughter-in-law trying to drive a wedge between mother and son. This was a calculated plan to take everything I had spent a lifetime building. For the remainder of the reception, I maintained a calm facade, smiling appropriately, raising my glass for toasts, and even managing to dance with Nathan when tradition demanded it. Inside, however, I was ice cold and utterly clear about what needed to happen next. Are you enjoying the wedding, Mom? Nathan asked as we swayed to a slow song, his face flushed with happiness and champagne. It's beautiful, I replied truthfully. Everything is perfect. Amanda must have worked very hard to plan it all. She's amazing, he agreed, his eyes drifting to where his new wife was charming a group of guests. I'm so lucky she chose me. I looked at my son, my kind, somewhat naive son who had inherited his father's trusting nature rather than my more cautious one, and made a decision. I would not tell him what I had overheard, at least not yet. It would only sound like the bitter complaints of a jealous mother, unwilling to let go. He wouldn't believe me without proof, and confronting the issue now would only drive him further away. Instead, I would protect him the way I always had, even if he didn't know he needed protection. And I would make sure that Amanda Porter, now Amanda Wilson, learned a valuable lesson about underestimating a woman who had built a real estate empire from nothing. I left the reception early, pleading a migraine. Nathan was concerned, but Amanda smoothly stepped in. You should rest, Leona. It's been such an emotional day for you. We completely understand if you need to go back to the inn. I hugged my son tightly, telling him how much I loved him, how proud his father would be. Then I kissed Amanda's cheek, feeling her stiffen slightly at the unexpected affection. Welcome to the family, dear, I said warmly. I'm so looking forward to our future together. As my driver took me back to the inn, I was already formulating my plan. While the newlyweds would be honeymooning in the Maldives for 2 weeks, I would be very, very busy. Amanda thought she was dealing with a sentimental old woman she could easily manipulate. She was about to discover just how wrong she was. I barely slept that night at the inn, my mind racing with plans and calculations. By 6 the next morning, I was showered, dressed, and making phone calls. The first was to Robert Jenkins, the attorney who had handled Williams and my legal affairs for over 20 years. Robert, I need to see you today. It's urgent, I said when he answered his cell phone. It was Sunday, but emergencies didn't respect weekends. Leona, aren't you at Nathan's wedding weekend? He asked, confused. The wedding was yesterday. I'm heading back to Boston this morning, and I need to meet with you as soon as possible. Can you come to my hotel?" Robert must have heard the steel in my voice because he agreed without further questions. 3 hours later, I was checked into the Four Seasons in Boston, and Robert was sitting across from me in the suite's living room, looking concerned as I recounted what I had overheard. "That's disturbing, certainly," he said when I finished. "But Leona, it could just be wedding day stress and alcohol talking. People say things they don't mean all the time." I fixed him with a steady gaze. "You and I both know that's not true. The level of detail, the calculated nature of the plans, this wasn't idle talk. This was a strategy session." Robert sighed, removing his glasses to polish them, a habit he had when thinking through complex problems. "All right, assuming you're correct about Amanda's intentions, what do you want to do?" "I want to protect what William and I built. And ultimately, I want to protect Nathan, even if he doesn't understand that he needs protection right now." "Let me remind you of your current situation from a legal perspective," Robert said, putting his glasses back on. "The beach house, the Boston property, and all other real estate holdings are solely in your name. William's will left everything to you outright, not in trust. The company Wilson Properties is 85% owned by you, with Nathan holding the remaining 15% that you gifted him when he joined the firm." "And if I were to sell any of those properties?" I asked, already knowing the answer but wanting confirmation. "That would be entirely your decision. The proceeds would be yours alone. Nathan would have no legal claim to them regardless of any emotional attachment or expectations." I nodded a plan crystallizing in my mind. What if I wanted to sell quickly? Very quickly? Robert looked surprised. "The beach house and Boston property are both valuable, desirable real estate. With the right buyer and price, we could expedite the process, but we'd still be talking weeks, not days." "I don't have weeks," I said firmly. "I need this done before Nathan and Amanda return from their honeymoon in 14 days. "That's ambitious," Robert said diplomatically. "May I ask why the rush? Even if Amanda has these intentions, implementing them would take time. You have the opportunity to address this more deliberately." "Because I know my son," I explained. "Once he's back with Amanda, whispering in his ear, any action I take will be seen as an attack on her on their marriage. He'll be defensive and hurt. But if it's already done when they return, a fait accompli, he'll be forced to accept it and move forward." Robert still looked skeptical. "You're talking about selling properties worth millions of dollars in a matter of days. That's virtually unprecedented unless you're willing to take a significant loss." "I'm willing to be flexible on price for the right buyers," I replied, "and I already have some ideas about who those buyers might be." As Robert continued to raise practical concerns, I took out my phone and called Margaret Sinclair, my longtime friend, and one of Boston's top luxury real estate brokers. "Maggie, it's Leona. I need your help with something unusual." I explained that I wanted to sell both my beach house and Boston home immediately, ideally within the next week. There was a long pause on the line. "Leona, are you in some kind of trouble? This isn't like you at all." "No trouble, just a change in priorities. I'm looking to downsize dramatically and quickly." "The Cape Cod property could move fast," Margaret said thoughtfully. "Alexander Reynolds has been asking about beachfront properties in that area for months. He lost out on the Sanderson place and was devastated. He might jump at yours, especially since it's superior in every way." "Call him," I instructed. "Tell him it's available, but only if he can close within 10 days. And Maggie, I'm willing to go 15% below market value for that kind of timeline." Robert was scribbling notes furiously, looking increasingly alarmed at the direction this was taking. "And the Beacon Hill house?" Margaret asked. "Same terms. Anyone who's expressed interest in the last year or so, the Blackwells were looking at a similar property on the same street last fall, weren't they?" "They were, but they thought the asking price was too high." "With your discount for a fast close, It might be exactly what they're looking for. After finishing the call with Margaret, I turned back to Robert, who was watching me with a mixture of professional concern and personal worry. Leona, I have to advise against this course of action. Making major financial decisions under emotional distress is rarely wise. I'm not under emotional distress, I countered calmly. I'm seeing things clearly for the first time in months. Amanda showed me her true colors, and now I'm responding accordingly. At least sleep on it, he urged. Give yourself 24 hours before setting this in motion. I don't have the luxury of time, I replied. And frankly, Robert, I didn't call you for permission. I called you because I need the legal paperwork prepared immediately. If you're not comfortable with that, I understand, but I'll find another attorney who is. Robert had been my lawyer for too long to mistake my resolve. By the end of our meeting, he had reluctantly agreed to prepare the necessary documentation for both sales pending interested buyers. After he left, I called James Harrington, my banker of 15 years, requesting an urgent meeting for the following morning. Then I contacted a real estate agent about luxury condominiums in the Back Bay area of Boston. Finally, I called my assistant at Wilson Properties, asking her to prepare comprehensive reports on all current projects and financial holdings. By the time I went to bed that night, my plan was in motion. Amanda thought she was playing chess carefully, positioning her pieces for a future victory. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't playing chess at all. I was flipping the board entirely. The next morning was a whirlwind of meetings and calls. Margaret reported that Alexander Reynolds was indeed extremely interested in the Cape Cod property and had already made a preliminary offer contingent on a quick walkthrough. The Blackwells were equally enthusiastic about the Beacon Hill house, especially at the reduced price point, for a fast closing. My meeting with James at the bank focused on restructuring my assets. I established a new holding company separate from Wilson Properties to manage the proceeds from the house sales and a significant portion of my other investments. May I ask what prompted this sudden reorganization? James inquired carefully. Estate planning, I replied smoothly. Nathan's marriage has made me reconsider how best to protect the legacy William and I built. By Monday afternoon, Alexander Reynolds had toured the beach house and increased his initial offer, eager to secure the property before anyone else could step in. The Blackwells had scheduled a viewing of the Beacon Hill house for Tuesday morning, having already secured preliminary mortgage approval based on their strong financial position. Robert called with updates on the sale contracts, still trying to convince me to slow down the process. I remained firm, instructing him to include additional provisions to prevent any challenges to the sales after the fact. As all this was happening, I was also viewing condominiums eventually settling on a stunning penthouse with panoramic views of the Charles River. It was significantly smaller than my Beacon Hill home, but elegant and low maintenance, perfect for the next chapter of my life. By Wednesday, just 4 days after the wedding, both properties were under contract. The beach house would close on Friday, the Beacon Hill home the following Monday, both well before Nathan and Amanda were scheduled to return from their honeymoon. I spent Thursday packing personal items from both homes, family photos, William's favorite books, Nathan's childhood mementos, and other irreplaceable treasures. Everything else, furniture, art, appliances, would be included in the sale's further incentive for the buyers to move quickly. On Friday morning, I sat in Robert's office signing the final paperwork to transfer ownership of the Cape Cod beach house to Alexander Reynolds. As I watched the notary stamp the last document, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. "Are you sure about this, Leona?" Robert asked one final time. "Once this is done, there's no going back." I thought about all the memories in that house. Nathan learning to swim, William and I watching sunsets, family holidays, quiet weekends. But then I remembered Amanda's cold, calculating voice. "We'll put his mom in a nursing home and take that beach house." "I'm sure," I said firmly, sliding the signed documents across the desk. Better to let it go on my terms than have it taken from me on someone else's. By Monday afternoon, both properties were officially sold. The beach house that Amanda had coveted was now owned by Alexander Reynolds, who planned to use it as a summer retreat for his large extended family. The Beacon Hill home had passed to the Blackwells, a lovely couple in their 50s, with grown children who were excited to finally own their dream house. The proceeds from both sales, totaling nearly $8 million after the discounted prices, were safely deposited in accounts under my new holding company, completely separate from Wilson Properties and beyond Amanda's reach. I had moved into my new condominium, which I had purchased outright with cash. It was being furnished and decorated by an interior designer who understood my need for an expedited timeline. All that remained was to wait for Nathan and Amanda to return and discover that their carefully laid plans had been completely upended. I had no illusions that this would be an easy conversation or that Nathan would immediately understand my actions, but I was prepared for the confrontation, secure in the knowledge that I had protected what was rightfully mine. Amanda had severely underestimated me, mistaking my maternal affection for Nathan as a weakness she could exploit. She was about to learn that I hadn't built a successful real estate empire by being naive or easily manipulated, and while the lesson might be painful for Nathan, in the short term, I hoped that eventually he would understand that everything I had done was ultimately to protect him too. As I settled into my new home, watching the sunset over the Charles River from my penthouse balcony, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. Whatever happened next, I had reclaimed control of my life and my legacy, and that was something no one, not even the calculating Amanda, could take away from me. Nathan and Amanda were scheduled to return from their honeymoon on a Sunday afternoon. I had arranged for a car service to pick them up from the airport and bring them to my new condominium, rather than the Beacon Hill home they were expecting. Nathan had texted me their arrival time from the Maldives, mentioning how excited they were to come home and tell me all about their trip. I spent that morning preparing for their arrival, ordering a catered lunch, and arranging for a good bottle of champagne to be chilled. On the surface, it would appear to be a celebratory welcome home gathering. In reality, it would be the setting for a difficult but necessary conversation. At precisely 2 o'clock, the concierge called to announce their arrival. I took a deep breath, smoothing my silk blouse, and opened the door to greet them. "Mom," Nathan exclaimed, his face showing a mixture of confusion and concern as he looked around the unfamiliar hallway. "What is this place? Why are we here?" The driver said there was a change of address. Amanda stood slightly behind him, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp and assessing. She was tanned from their beach vacation, wearing an expensive linen dress and carrying a designer handbag that was likely a honeymoon purchase. "Welcome back," I said warmly, embracing Nathan and then nodding politely to Amanda. "Please come in. I have lunch prepared and I'm eager to hear all about the Maldives." They followed me into the elegant living area with its floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the river view. Nathan's confusion only deepened as he took in the unfamiliar furnishings and clearly different space. "Mom, what's going on? Whose place is this? Are you house-sitting or something?" "This is my home now," I replied calmly, gesturing for them to take a seat on the sofa. "I've made some significant changes while you were away. Please sit down. I'll explain everything." Nathan remained standing, his honeymoon glow rapidly fading. "What do you mean, you're home now? What happened to our house?" I noticed his choice of words. "Our house," confirming that he already thought of my property as partly his, just as Amanda had planned. "Let's start with some champagne." I suggested moving to the kitchen area to retrieve the bottle I'd been chilling. I needed a moment to compose myself to ensure I remained calm throughout what would surely be a difficult conversation. Amanda had moved to the windows, eyeing the view with grudging appreciation. This is Back Bay, isn't it? These condos sell for millions. What exactly is happening here, Leona? I poured 3 glasses of champagne and handed them out, raising mine slightly. To new beginnings, I said, taking a small sip. Nathan ignored his glass, placing it on the coffee table with more force than necessary. Mom, you're scaring me. Please just tell us what's going on. I set my glass down and looked my son directly in the eyes. I sold the beach house in Cape Cod and our family home in Beacon Hill. Both sales closed last week. This condominium is my new residence. The silence that followed was absolute. Nathan stared at me as if I'd started speaking in tongues. Amanda's face went completely still, only her eyes betraying the rapid calculations happening behind them. You... What? Nathan finally managed. You sold our houses without telling me, without even discussing it. They weren't our houses, Nathan, I corrected gently. They were my houses. Your father left them to me, not to us, collectively. But the beach house, all those memories, how could you just sell it without even talking to me first? The genuine pain in his voice made me waver briefly, but I steeled myself remembering what was at stake. I made a decision that was best for my future, I said simply. Amanda had recovered enough to interject her voice carefully modulated to express concern rather than the rage I suspected she was feeling. Leona, this is so sudden. Are you having financial difficulties? Is that what this is about? Because Nathan and I would have been happy to help. I almost admired her performance. The concerned daughter-in-law ready to step in and support her husband's struggling mother. It was exactly the narrative she had been planning to construct over time. Not at all, I replied pleasantly. In fact, quite the opposite. The sales were extremely profitable and I've reinvested the proceeds wisely. But why? Nathan demanded, beginning to pace the room. Why would you sell places that meant so much to our family? Dad loved that beach house. We grew up going there every summer, and the Beacon Hill house has been our home for over 20 years. Sometimes we need to let go of physical spaces to preserve what really matters, I said. The memories don't live in the houses, Nathan. They live in us. Amanda's eyes had narrowed slightly. I could almost see her trying to figure out my motivations to understand if this was random or somehow directed at her plans. When did you even have time to do all this? She asked. We've only been gone for 2 weeks. I work quickly when I need to, I replied. It's a skill I developed over decades in real estate. Nathan had stopped pacing and was looking at me with growing suspicion. This isn't like you, Mom. You've always been sentimental about our family properties. Dad built that business so we'd have those places forever. What's really going on here? It was the opening I had been waiting for. I took a deep breath and placed the final document on the coffee table, a copy of the new structure for Wilson Properties that I had established with Robert's help. I've also reorganized the company, I said calmly. I've established a new holding company for my personal assets, separate from Wilson Properties. Nathan, you still retain your 15% ownership and you'll continue in your current role. But I wanted clearer boundaries between family assets and company assets. Amanda could no longer contain herself. You did all this without consulting Nathan. He's your son, your only child. Doesn't he deserve some say in decisions that affect his inheritance? And there it was, the word that revealed everything. Inheritance. Not Nathan's feelings, not family history, not emotional connections to properties. What Amanda cared about was the inheritance she thought she would eventually control. Inheritance is something that happens after death. I pointed out. I'm very much alive, and I intend to remain so for many years to come. These are my assets to manage as I see fit. Nathan was looking back and forth between us, sensing undercurrents, but not fully understanding them. This doesn't make any sense. Why would you suddenly sell everything and reorganize the company right after my wedding? Is this about Amanda somehow? Amanda quickly placed her hand on his arm. Nathan, don't be ridiculous. This isn't about me. Your mother is clearly going through something. Maybe it's empty nest syndrome or some kind of delayed grief about your father. Actually, I said, meeting Amanda's gaze directly, this is very much about you, Amanda. Nathan looked confused. What are you talking about? I had debated how to handle this moment, whether to reveal exactly what I had overheard or to keep that information to myself. In the end, I decided that Nathan deserved to know the truth, however painful. At your wedding reception, I overheard a conversation between Amanda and Brittany in the sitting room near the bridal suite. They were discussing plans for your future, specifically plans involving my beach house and eventually the Boston home as well. Amanda's face drained of color, but she quickly recovered. That's absurd. I don't know what you think you heard, but you said, and I quote, "We'll put his mom in a nursing home and take that beach house. She won't need it anymore." I interrupted, my voice steady. You discussed how you'd been dreaming about that beach house since Nathan first took you there. You and Brittany then talked about the Boston house as well, and how as an only child, Nathan would inherit everything. The company, the properties, everything, as you put it. Nathan had gone very still, looking at Amanda with growing horror. Tell me that's not true, he said quietly. Tell me my mother misheard or is making this up. Amanda's strategy shifted visibly, her expression morphing from denial to righteous indignation. Your mother was eavesdropping on a private conversation at our wedding. How could you do that, Leona? I was looking for a restroom, I explained calmly. The main floor facilities had lines. I went upstairs and happened to pass by as you were speaking. I wasn't trying to listen, but what I heard was impossible to ignore. It was probably just wedding stress talk, Amanda insisted, turning to Nathan. You know how overwhelming that day was. Brittany and I might have been venting or joking around. Your mother took it completely out of context. There was quite a bit of context, I countered. You specifically discussed techniques for convincing Nathan I was declining mentally, moving my things around to make me think I was becoming forgetful, messing with my calendar. You talked about a timeline of a year or two before suggesting I'd be happier in a nice assisted living community. Those were your exact words. Nathan looked physically ill. Amanda, is this true? Amanda's eyes filled with tears. Impressive considering the calculation I could still see behind them. Of course not. Not the way she's making it sound. We might have discussed the future in general terms. At some point, many older people do need assistance. My grandmother had to move into assisted living because she couldn't manage alone anymore. It was a hypothetical conversation, not some evil master plan. You also discussed how Nathan should take a more active role in the company, positioned to step in when I inevitably made mistakes, I added. You were quite confident that Nathan would prioritize protecting the family assets over my autonomy. Nathan turned to me, his expression anguished. And your solution was to sell everything out from under us to make sure there was nothing left for Amanda to take. Don't you see how extreme that is, even if what you're saying is true? I protected what was mine. I said simply, if Amanda truly loved you for yourself, not your inheritance prospects, this wouldn't matter at all. Amanda seized on this immediately. That's completely unfair. Of course I love Nathan for himself. But being concerned about his rightful inheritance doesn't make me a gold digger. Those properties should have stayed in the family, for your future grandchildren, if nothing else. It was a clever pivot, appealing to my potential role as a grandmother, making me seem selfish for denying future generations their birthright. If I hadn't heard her true intentions firsthand, it might even have been effective. My decision wasn't made lightly, I said, softening my tone slightly as I looked at Nathan's devastated face. But I needed to protect myself, and ultimately to protect you too, Nathan. Protect me, he repeated incredulously. By selling our family homes without even telling me, by blindsiding me the minute I get back from my honeymoon. Yes, I confirmed. Because I knew that once you were back with Amanda influencing you, any action I took would be seen as an attack on her on your marriage. You wouldn't have listened to my concerns. You would have defended her just as you're doing now, despite the evidence. Amanda was fully crying now, tears streaming down her face. Nathan, she's trying to come between us. Can't you see that she's always been threatened by our relationship, by the idea of not being the most important woman in your life anymore? For a moment, I thought Nathan might believe her. But then something shifted in his expression. A flicker of doubt. A memory, perhaps. You did ask a lot of questions about the beach house, he said, slowly turning to Amanda. About who owned it, whether it would eventually be ours. I thought you were just excited about our future together, but looking back. Of course I asked questions, Amanda replied, wiping at her tears. I wanted to understand your family, your background. That's normal when you're planning a life with someone. Nathan turned to me. Did you get all this on tape? Do you have any actual proof of what you claim Amanda said? No, I admitted. I have only what I heard with my own ears. Convenient? Amanda muttered. But, I continued, I did hire a private investigator to look into Amanda's background when I began noticing inconsistencies in her stories. Would you like to see that report? The blood drained from Amanda's face. You investigated me, that's invasion of privacy, that's stalking. What inconsistencies? Nathan asked, ignoring her outburst. I retrieved the file I had prepared and handed it to Nathan. Her family background for one. She told you her father was a successful investment banker from Greenwich, but he actually owns a struggling used car dealership in Queens. She changed her name from Pearson to Porter at 22, right after receiving a settlement from the estate of Martin Geller, an elderly man she had been dating, who changed his will in her favor shortly before his death. Nathan began flipping through the report, his expression growing more troubled with each page. Amanda! She was no longer crying, her face now hard with anger. So I came from humble beginnings and wanted a better life. Is that a crime? I changed my name because I wanted a fresh start. And Martin was a dear friend who wanted to help me pursue my dreams. His greedy children contested the will, so I settled to avoid a lengthy court battle. None of this proves I don't love Nathan. Perhaps not, I conceded, but it establishes a pattern of behavior that lends credibility to what I overheard at the wedding. Nathan closed the file and put his head in his hands. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall and Amanda's occasional sniffling. Finally, Nathan looked up, his eyes red but dry. I need some time to process all this. Alone. Amanda immediately reached for his hand. We can go back to our apartment. We'll talk it through together. No, Nathan said firmly, pulling his hand away. I said alone, Amanda. I need to think without either of you trying to convince me what to believe. She looked stricken. You can't seriously be doubting me based on your mother's manipulations. I don't know what to believe right now, Nathan replied wearily. But I know I need space to figure it out. He stood up and looked at me. I understand why you felt you had to protect yourself, Mom, but selling those houses without even talking to me first? That's going to take a long time to forgive, if I ever can. I understand, I said softly. I love you, Nathan. That hasn't changed and never will. He nodded curtly and turned to Amanda. I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight. I'll call you tomorrow. Nathan, please, she began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. Not now. I can't do this right now. With that, he walked out, leaving Amanda and me alone in the suddenly too quiet apartment. Amanda's facade crumbled entirely once the door closed behind him. The tears vanished, replaced by cold fury. You've ruined everything, she hissed, all pretense of the sweet daughter-in-law gone. "Do you have any idea how long I worked on this? How carefully I planned? Nathan was perfect, an only child, a guaranteed inheritance, a mother who could be easily manipulated through her devotion to her son." "That was your first mistake," I replied calmly. "You assumed my love for Nathan was a weakness you could exploit. You failed to understand that mothers will do anything to protect their children, even from beautiful, manipulative women they foolishly marry." Amanda snatched up her purse, her movements sharp with rage. "This isn't over. Nathan loves me. Once he calms down, he'll see that you're just a jealous old woman who couldn't stand to see him happy with someone else." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "That's a risk I had to take. But at least now he has the opportunity to make that decision with his eyes open and without the beach house or family home clouding his judgment." She moved toward the door but paused with her hand on the handle. "You know, the saddest part is that eventually I would have let you visit the beach house, maybe even stay there occasionally if you behaved yourself." The sheer audacity of her statement, the idea that she would allow me access to my own property, confirmed everything I had suspected about her character. "Goodbye, Amanda," I said simply. "I wish I could say it was a pleasure knowing you." After she left, I poured myself another glass of champagne and moved to the balcony, watching the river flow below. I had no illusions that this was the end of the matter. Nathan might indeed reconcile with Amanda, might even turn against me entirely. The pain of that possibility was acute, but I had done what needed to be done. The beach house was gone. The family home was gone. The company was protected. And most importantly, Amanda's true nature had been revealed before she could implement her plans to systematically strip me of everything I had worked for. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms, not as a pawn in Amanda's game. And that ultimately was worth any price I had to pay. 1 year has passed since that confrontation in my condominium. The seasons have changed, life has moved forward, and much has transpired in ways I never could have predicted. My new penthouse has become a true home, filled with carefully selected furniture and art that reflect this new chapter of my life. The space is modern, yet warm, with large windows that flood the rooms with natural light and provide ever-changing views of the Boston skyline and the Charles River. It's smaller than my Beacon Hill house was, but perfectly suited to my needs now. The proceeds from selling the 2 houses have been wisely invested, providing a comfortable, additional income stream beyond what Wilson Properties generates. I hired a new financial advisor, younger and more aggressive in her investment approach than my previous one, and the results have exceeded my expectations. As for Nathan and Amanda, their marriage unraveled surprisingly quickly after our confrontation. Nathan checked into a hotel that day and stayed for nearly a week, during which time he apparently did substantial thinking and investigation of his own. He told me later that he contacted Brittany, Amanda's maid of honor, and under the guise of trying to understand what happened, managed to get her to essentially confirm much of what I had reported overhearing. "Brittany thought I already knew everything," Nathan explained during one of our first tentative reconciliation dinners about a month after the confrontation. "She kept saying things like Amanda didn't mean it exactly the way it sounded, and everyone says crazy things at weddings." She never actually denied that the conversation happened. Nathan and Amanda separated just 2 months after their wedding. The divorce proceedings were contentious, with Amanda hiring an aggressive attorney who attempted to claim that she was entitled to a portion of Nathan's stake in Wilson Properties, as well as potential future inheritance. Fortunately, Robert had insisted on a comprehensive prenuptial agreement as part of Nathan's estate planning, which limited what Amanda could pursue. "She changed completely once she realized it was over," Nathan told me. "It was like watching a mask fall away. The woman I thought I married never really existed." The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. Amanda received a modest settlement that Nathan insisted on providing, despite having the prenup to protect him. "I just want her out of our lives," he explained when I questioned his generosity. "It's worth it to make a clean break." Nathan has grown tremendously through this experience. The painful revelation of Amanda's true character forced him to confront his own naivety and tendency to see what he wanted to see rather than reality. He threw himself into work at Wilson Properties, taking on more responsibility and showing a decisiveness that reminds me of his father. Our relationship has evolved as well. The initial anger and sense of betrayal Nathan felt about my selling the family properties without consulting him has gradually given way to understanding, if not complete forgiveness. We've had many long, honest conversations about trust boundaries and the complex dynamics of parent-child relationships in adulthood. "I still wish you had found another way," he admitted during one such talk, "but I understand why you felt backed into a corner. And I can't deny that it forced the truth into the open before Amanda and I had children, or became even more entangled." As for me, I've experienced a kind of liberation I never expected at this stage of life. Freed from the responsibilities of maintaining large properties and unencumbered by others' expectations, I finally took the round-the-world trip that William and I had always planned for our retirement. For 3 months, I traveled to places we had dreamed of visiting together: the Amalfi Coast, Kyoto, New Zealand, the Serengeti. I brought a small urn with some of William's ashes, leaving a pinch at each destination, a private ritual that brought me comfort and closure. The trip was transformative. I met fascinating people, tried foods I'd never heard of, slept in everything from 5-star hotels to simple guest houses overlooking rice fields. I learned that I was more adaptable and adventurous than I had realized, that I could navigate foreign cities alone, make new friends in unexpected places, and find joy in experiences rather than possessions. When I returned to Boston, I brought this new energy into other aspects of my life. I joined the board of a nonprofit organization that helps older women protect themselves from financial exploitation, sharing my experience and expertise with those who might be vulnerable to the kind of scheme Amanda had planned for me. The work is deeply satisfying, turning my painful experience into something that helps others. Wilson Properties continues to thrive with Nathan taking an increasingly prominent role. We've found a new balance in our professional relationship with me, gradually stepping back from day-to-day operations while maintaining strategic oversight. Nathan has proven himself worthy of the trust, making smart, considered decisions that honor the company's legacy while moving it into the future. About 3 months ago, I had an unexpected encounter with Amanda. I was attending a charity gala at the Ritz-Carlton when I spotted her across the ballroom on the arm of Edward Barrett, a widowed shipping magnate in his 70s. She was radiant in an expensive gown, laughing at something he said, her hand possessively on his arm. She saw me watching, and after a moment of visible surprise, gave me a cool nod before deliberately turning away. I felt no anger, seeing her, only a certain sadness for Edward Barrett, and a profound relief that Nathan had escaped the fate she had planned for him. Some predators never change their methods, only their hunting grounds. Last weekend, Nathan invited me to dinner at his new apartment, a stylish loft in South End that reflects his evolving tastes and independence. Over dessert, he shared that he's been seeing someone, a landscape architect he met through a mutual friend. He was cautious in describing her, almost apologetic. "She's nothing like Amanda," he assured me. "She's genuine, down to earth. She comes from a normal family in Vermont, runs her own small design firm. I'm taking things very slowly this time." "I'd love to meet her when you're ready," I told him, meaning it sincerely. The wariness in his eyes, the fear that I might judge this new relationship harshly because of what happened with Amanda, was painful to see but understandable. Trust once broken rebuilds slowly. As I reflect on everything that's happened, I realize that selling the beach house and family home wasn't just about protecting myself from Amanda's schemes. It was also about breaking free from the weight of the past, from the idea that places and things define us. William isn't in that beach house or the Beacon Hill home. He's in my heart, in my memories in the company we built together, and in the remarkable son we raised. Life is too short to live according to others' expectations. I wasted months trying to accommodate Amanda out of fear of losing Nathan, instead of trusting my instincts and standing firm in my own authority. I won't make that mistake again. My remaining years will be lived on my terms, guided by my values and desires, not by fear of others' judgments or manipulations. If you're watching this and facing your own Amanda, someone who sees you as an obstacle to what they want, who views your age as a weakness rather than a source of wisdom and strength, remember this. You have power. You have agency. You have the right to protect what you've built, even if others label you selfish or difficult for doing so. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself, even when others didn't understand? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and self-determination. And if you know someone who might be facing a similar situation, someone being pressured about their property or assets by family members, please share this with them. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone in these struggles is the first step toward finding our courage. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to change direction, to embrace a new chapter. Age isn't a liability. It's a resource, a wellspring of experience and wisdom that no one can take from you unless you allow it.